Welcome back. So here's another set of examples with combinations, except I'm going to bring about something which most of the time isn't talked about when you're doing combinations. So that's repetition. So like what happens when you have repeating items. Now in permutations, when you had repetitions, you saw that you kind of had to break things down into cases. And maybe I'll put up a link up above here for those ordered counting with regards to permutations under repetition. I think it's worth a look. But in these examples, I'll take kind of very similar examples that I talked about there, but now, order is irrelevant, and we do have repeating items. Okay, so if we would tackle something like this, where it says how many different combinations of the two would we have from the set AA, B, C, D. So notice that we do have repetition of the AA. Now, if we wanted to break this apart, right? So typically what we would do is, let's imagine that the two A's are kind of different and we wanted to see how many combinations we had. We would just say, okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we would say we have 5, and then we're going to be choosing 2, and that would have given us the total number of combinations, right, that we would have. Now, does having these two A's matter, right? Are we maybe counting something 2 times that we wouldn't have? So let's see if that happens, and then we'll do another example where these A's are not only 2 but maybe 3, and then what you should think about. Okay, so if we're choosing 2 items, so if we're going to be choosing 2 items, what could possibly happen here? Well, if it's A and A, because the order doesn't matter, then really this is the only thing that can possibly happen, right? That would have been one combination from right here. If we only have 1A, right? If we only had 1A, so from the 2, and then the rest of them were either B, C, or D. So notice that's only 3 different ways that we can do that. So 3 choose 1. Okay. So that would have been, we had 1 and then 3 different ways. So that's, 4 now in total, 1 plus the 3. And then finally, if there were no A's at all, so we would have either a B, C, or D, then we're really just choosing 3, choose 2, right? So that's what we're trying to do. So we would have 3 and then choose 2 if there were no A's at all. So here this was, 2 A's, 1 A, and then no A. So this is 3 choose 2. And 3 choose 2, I guess, is 3 again. So in total, we actually have 7, right? And so within here, if you would have went with this and you said 5 choose 2, what would have happened? Well, what would have happened is the fact that 5 choose 2 is 10, right? So 5 factorial, 3 factorial, 2 factorial, 5, 4, so that's just 10. So notice we overcounted if we just went with this because of the fact that we had repetitions. This is if we are choosing different combinations that we would really want, right? So that's something that we do have to worry about if we want different types of combinations, and we have to kind of break them down into these cases, case 1, case 2, case 3, and slowly break them down. So it's something you might want to think about. I don't know if your teachers are going to challenge you on these. I would, because of the fact that, I think it makes you really think and understand how these combinations actually occur, right? And you can now list them all for yourself, and you will notice that because of the 2 A's, you would have had, so notice you would have had A, B, A, C, A, D. And then if you took the other A, right, you would have, so let's say if this was the first A, you would have the same thing, A, B, A, C, and then A, D. And notice that, these were kind of repeated here, right? here, and then here. So that's what you have to worry about, okay, under the repetition of these. So here's another example, except now, okay, hopefully you can see how this might work. So we have now, I've inserted another A, and we're still wanting to pick 2. So how would you approach this if you wanted, again, different types? So you can't just go that this would have been 6, choose 2, and then, get your answer in here, because you would have repetition, right, once again. So if you do want different types of combinations, you have to break it down into cases once again. So, typically you can say, okay, well, I'm picking 2 right here, and if both of these are A's, right, then there's really just one way to do that. And that could have been any of the A's, right? So any of the 3 A's. So number 2, the case is, well, now what if you had 1A and then you had, so again, it doesn't matter which one. And then the rest, you're filling in with whatever's left over, which is the B, C, or D, which is just 3, and you're choosing one of them in here. So that's actually 3 ways. And then the third case would have been, well, what if you had no A's at all, right? And then so we saw that this was 3, choose 2, which again would have been 3, and total 7. So notice the total number, if you do these by cases, was actually the same as it was here. So it doesn't matter how many more A's we're adding, right? The different combinations that we would get, okay, are still the same. But, of course, the more A's that you add, the more instances, for example, of this case you would get. So if eventually you start talking about probabilities, like what's the probability, okay, out of these, if you had these in a bag or something, that you would pull out, 2 A's, then obviously the probability is much higher, okay, if you have more A's in there than you have less A's. But if you're just looking for the different types of combinations, then in here, okay, so what you would have is, okay, the combinations would be the same. Just some of them would repeat more often than others. So that's something that you have to think about. Here's a last example. I didn't actually write this one down, but I did do an example like this with combinations. But let's say if we were thinking about, different, okay? So let's imagine that we had 5 dimes, and then we had 5 quarters. And then we had a bag, and then we would pull out from this bag, and we wanted to get 2 coins, right? And then what if the question was because they're so dimes, that's 10 cents, and then quarters is 25 cents. What if they said how many different sums you would have from here, right? So we have 10 coins, we can choose 2 of them, but there's a lot of repetition here, right? You can pick a dime, so a 10 and a 10. So the sum would have been, 20. You can pick a dime, okay, and you can pick a quarter, and that, I guess, is 35, the sum, so 35 cents. And, can you pick another, combination with a dime? No, not really, right? So the only one left now is the 25, but that would have been, just a quarter and a quarter, okay, and that is 50 cents. Are there any other different types of combination? Different, right? So notice it's interesting because you can either get, a dime and a dime and a quarter, and then a quarter and a quarter. That's pretty much it. There isn't anything else. Now, there's a lot of dimes and a lot of quarters, so a lot of them will repeat, but this is what we would have. So with repetitions, okay, as you have in here, you kind of have to be careful because clearly notice, 2 choose 10. I think it's 210, right? So that's 210 different combinations. And of course, they are different combinations because they're different dimes and quarters. But in terms of, finding out what the sums would be, the different ones, well, there's only 3, so it doesn't matter that there's 210 different combinations because they're all yielding out either 20 cents, 35 cents, or 50 cents, okay, within here. So these are kind of different types of examples with combinations. And, you know, again, you have to kind of break sometimes some of them up in terms of cases. And then have a systematic way, you know, like, okay, if this happens this many times and then less times and no times, and yeah, it, you know, it sometimes sucks because you have to go through those combinations. But it's worthwhile to be able to go and do that type of exercise. All right, so that is it for these examples. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in a future video. Okay, bye everybody.